The eviction notice was taped to the door when Maya Chen came home from her double shift at the diner. Bright orange paper that screamed failure in official legal language. She had 7 days to vacate the premises or the sheriff would remove her belongings to the curb. Her 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, ages 6 and 9, stood behind her in the hallway of the run-down apartment building, their backpacks still on from the after-school program that cost money Maya didn't have. "Mommy, what's that paper?" Emma asked, her small voice cutting through the fog in Maya's head. "Nothing, baby. Just some grown-up stuff."
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
Maya pulled the notice down and crumpled it in her fist, shoving it deep into her purse where the girls couldn't see it. But Sophie had already read enough of it to understand. At 9 years old, she'd gotten good at reading Maya's face, at knowing when things were bad, even when her mother tried to smile through it. They'd been living in this 2-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood for 8 months. Before that, it was a studio in Van Nuys. Before that, a cousin's couch. Before that, when Emma was still a baby and Sophie barely remembered, they'd had a real home with Maya's ex-husband David. But David had decided fatherhood and responsibility were optional, and Maya had learned that being a single mother with a high school diploma in Los Angeles meant choosing between rent and food, between electricity and medical bills, between surviving today and planning for tomorrow. The rent was $1,700 a month for a place with water stains on the ceiling and cockroaches that came out after dark. Maya made about $2,200 between the diner and the weekend housekeeping jobs. But after childcare and bus passes and the minimum payments on credit cards she'd maxed out years ago, there was never enough left over. She'd been short on rent for 3 months running, promising the landlord she'd catch up, always one emergency away from complete collapse. That night, after the girls were asleep, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open to apartment listings she couldn't afford and job postings that required degrees she didn't have. The screen blurred as exhaustion pulled at her eyes. She was 31 years old and felt like she'd already lived 3 lifetimes, none of them the one she'd imagined when she was young and stupid enough to believe dreams came true if you just worked hard enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother in San Francisco. "Heard from your Aunt Lily. She passed away last week. Funeral was yesterday. Sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but you two weren't close." Maya stared at the message, trying to summon grief for a woman she'd met maybe 5 times in her entire life. Aunt Lily had been her father's older sister, a strange, reclusive woman who'd worked in Hollywood back in the 50s and 60s doing something with movies that her father had always been vague about. After Maya's dad died, when she was 12, Lily had sent a card but never called, never visited, just faded into the background of extended family Maya barely knew existed. A second text came through. "Lawyer says she left you something, gave him your number, said he'd be in touch." Maya's heart jumped despite herself, then settled back into its familiar rhythm of low expectations. People like Aunt Lily didn't leave fortunes to nieces they'd barely spoken to. It would be some old furniture, maybe a few $100s if Maya was lucky, enough to pay 1 month's rent and push the inevitable back by 30 days. The call came the next morning while Maya was getting the girls ready for school. A smooth male voice introduced himself as Gerald Hartman, attorney for the estate of Lillian Chen. He had news regarding Maya's inheritance and wondered if she could come by his office in Burbank that afternoon. "What exactly did she leave me?" Maya asked, already calculating whether she could afford to miss a shift at the diner. "It's best if we discuss it in person, Ms. Chen. Let's say 2 o'clock. Maya arrived at the lawyer's office in a building that looked like it had been fancy in 1985 and had been coasting on that reputation ever since. Gerald Hartman was in his 60s, wearing a suit that had seen better decades, with kind eyes behind thick glasses that made him look like an owl. "Your Aunt Lillian was an interesting woman," he began, opening a file folder thick with documents. "She worked in the film industry for over 40 years. Script supervisor, editor, film archivist. Started at MGM in 1952. Worked her way through most of the major studios before they started shutting down their backlots and archives in the 80s. Maya nodded, trying to look interested, while her mind calculated how long this would take and whether she'd make it to the diner in time for the dinner rush. In 1987, she purchased a property in Culver City, an old film studio that had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, paid $600 at a county auction. Hartman slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a massive building, 3 stories of concrete and steel with Art Deco details around the entrance. Windows broken or boarded up, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. "She left you that building, Ms. Chen, the studio and the 2 acres it sits on." Maya's first reaction wasn't excitement, it was exhaustion. "I can't afford to maintain a building like that. The property taxes alone are 14 months in arrears," Hartman finished. "Total amount owed is $8,300. If not paid within 60 days, the county will seize the property and sell it at auction." Of course, there was always a catch. Maya had inherited a money pit, a condemned building that would cost more to demolish than it was worth. She could already feel the weight of it settling on her shoulders, another problem she couldn't solve with no good options. "I appreciate you letting me know, but I think I'll just let the county take it. I don't have $8,000 and I wouldn't know what to do with an abandoned building if I did." Hartman's expression shifted, something that might have been disappointment crossing his face. "Your aunt spent the last 36 years of her life in that building, Ms. Chen. Lived there, worked there, died there. She was very specific in her will that if you inherited, you should at least see it before making any decisions. Why would she leave it to me? We barely knew each other. She said you were the only family member who might understand what she'd been protecting." Hartman pulled out a set of keys on a ring shaped like a film reel. "At least look at it. That's all I'm asking." Maya took the keys, feeling their weight in her palm. Cold metal that might as well have been shackles, but she'd learned that sometimes you had to walk through the doors, life opened, even when you were pretty sure there was nothing good on the other side. The Starlight Studios building sat on a forgotten corner of Culver City, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had collapsed in several places. Maya pulled up in her 15-year-old Honda Civic, the girls in the back seat with their faces pressed to the windows. "It looks like a haunted house," Sophie said, her voice mixing awe and fear in equal measure. "It looks like where Batman lives," Emma added. "Can we go inside?" Maya studied the building through the windshield, trying to see past the decay to whatever Aunt Lily had seen that made her spend 36 years here. The Art Deco facade was still visible beneath the grime, elegant lines and geometric patterns that spoke of an era when movies were magic and studios were temples dedicated to that magic. They got out of the car and approached the main entrance. The door was heavy steel with a faded painted sign. Starlight Studios, established 1928. The key turned in the lock with surprising ease, as if someone had been maintaining it recently. The interior took Maya's breath away. They stood in a massive lobby with 20-foot ceilings, Art Deco light fixtures hanging like frozen waterfalls, and a grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. Dust covered everything, but beneath it, Maya could see marble floors, brass railings, and murals on the walls depicting scenes from silent films. "Whoa!" Sophie breathed, her usual 9-year-old cynicism momentarily suspended. Emma ran to the staircase, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
Can we explore, please, Mom? Maya's instincts screamed to grab her daughters and leave. The building was probably structurally unsound, full of hazards she couldn't see. Exactly the kind of place where tragedy happened to broke single mothers who should have known better. But something about the space pulled at her, a whisper of possibility she couldn't quite define. "Stay close to me," she said. "Don't touch anything. That looks like it might fall." They explored the first floor together, moving through what had once been screening rooms and offices. Most of the furniture was gone, but Maya could imagine what it had looked like in its prime. The walls still had faded posters from movies she'd never heard of. Desert Dreams, starring Veronica Lane, Midnight Confession with Robert Sterling, films from another era when this building had been alive with creativity and purpose. In what had been the main production office, they found signs that Aunt Lily had lived here. A cot in the corner with neatly folded blankets, a hot plate and some canned goods, books stacked against the walls, most of them about film history and preservation, and photographs, dozens of them, showing a younger Lily standing with people in vintage clothing, holding cameras and lighting equipment, working on sets that no longer existed. "Your aunt was really into old movies," Sophie observed, picking up a photograph of Lily standing next to a massive film camera. Maya knelt beside the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. Film preservation manuals, studio histories, technical guides to film restoration. Aunt Lily hadn't just been interested in old movies. She'd been obsessed with saving them. They found the stairs to the second floor at the back of the building. The steps creaked ominously under their weight, but held. The second floor had been editing suites and storage rooms, most of them empty now. But in one room, they found something that made Maya's heart skip. Film canisters, hundreds of them, stacked floor to ceiling on industrial shelves. Each canister was labeled with dates and titles in Aunt Lily's careful handwriting. Most were marked 35 mm or 16 mm, followed by numbers Maya didn't understand. "Are these movies?" Emma asked, reaching for one of the canisters. "Don't touch," Maya said automatically, though she was reaching out herself, carefully lifting one of the canisters. It was heavier than she expected, metal painted black with rust around the edges. The label read, "The Phantom Queen, 1949, 35 mm, Reels 1-3. Sophie was reading other labels. "Lost Horizon Home, 1951. Shadows at Midnight, 1948. Mom, there's like 1,000 of these." Maya looked around the room, trying to calculate how many canisters there actually were. The shelves went up to the ceiling, 8 feet high, and covered 3 walls. Thousands of films stored here for decades. Why had Aunt Lily kept them? What were they worth? "We should go," Maya said, suddenly uneasy. "It's getting dark and we haven't eaten." But as they turned to leave, Sophie pointed to something on the far wall, a door partially hidden behind one of the shelving units. Unlike the other doors they'd seen, this one was steel with 3 separate deadbolts. "What's in there?" Sophie asked. "Probably nothing. Come on, girls." But Emma was already squeezing behind the shelving unit, her 6-year-old body small, enough to fit. "The door says something," she called back. Maya followed, her heart hammering. Behind the shelf, she could see what Emma had found. The steel door had words stenciled on it in faded red paint. "Vault room. Authorized personnel only." The keys from the lawyer included several that looked like they might fit the deadbolts. Maya tried them one by one, her hands shaking slightly. The last key turned with a heavy click, and the door swung inward. The room beyond was small, maybe 10 feet by 15, with walls lined in lead sheeting. Climate control equipment hummed quietly in the corner, somehow still running after all these years. And in the center of the room, on specially built shelves designed for maximum preservation, were more film canisters, But these were different. Each one was sealed in protective wrapping, labeled with meticulous detail, and arranged in careful chronological order. Maya picked up the nearest canister, her hands gentle despite not understanding what she was holding. The label read, Hitchcock, Untitled Thriller, 1952, Director's Cut, Reels 1-8. Her breath caught. Even she knew that name. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. But she'd never heard of an untitled thriller from 1952. Sophie was reading other labels, her voice rising with excitement. Mom, this one says Orson Welles. This one says Billy Wilder. Mom, these are famous people, right? From like really old movies? Maya moved through the vault room in a daze, reading labels that made her head spin. Directors she recognized even with her limited film knowledge. Actors who'd been legends before her parents were born. Titles she'd never heard of. Films that, according to these labels, should be famous, but weren't. And then she saw it. The canister that made her knees weak. The label was longer than the others, with notations in multiple hands, as if different people had added information over decades. The Magnificent Ambersons, 1942, Orson Welles, Original Cut, Reels, 113, Believed Lost, last known copy destroyed by RKO, 1942, Negative presumed destroyed, 1942. Maya had heard of the Magnificent Ambersons. Even she knew the story of how the studio had butchered Orson Welles' masterpiece, cutting an hour of footage and destroying the original negative. Film historians had been mourning that loss for 80 years, and it was here, in a vault room in an abandoned studio in Culver City, in a building Maya had inherited from an aunt she barely knew. She sat down hard on the floor, the canister still in her hands. Sophie and Emma clustered around her, sensing something significant had happened, even if they didn't understand what. Mom? Sophie's voice was worried. Are you okay? I don't know, baby. I really don't know. They left as the sun was setting, Maya locking the steel door and the main entrance behind them with shaking hands. The drive back to the apartment was silent, both girls sensing their mother needed quiet to process whatever had just happened. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Maya opened her laptop and started searching. The Magnificent Ambersons lost footage. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of articles about one of cinema's greatest mysteries. The 43 minutes of footage Orson Welles had shot that the studio destroyed, afraid his dark vision would hurt box office returns. Film historians estimated that if the original cut still existed, it would be worth tens of millions of dollars. A cultural treasure, a missing piece of cinema history that scholars had mourned for generations. Maya searched for the other titles she'd seen. Hitchcock, 1952, unreleased. Nothing. Orson Welles' unknown films. Lists of projects that were never completed or never released, but nothing matching what was in that vault. She spent 3 hours going down research rabbit holes, learning about lost films and the economics of film preservation, learning that studios had destroyed thousands of movies over the decades, either deliberately or through neglect. That film stock from before 1950 was incredibly fragile, degrading even when stored properly, that collectors would pay millions for certain lost films, that museums mounted exhibitions around single recovered reels. By 2 a.m, Maya understood 2 things with absolute clarity. First, that vault room contained something extraordinarily valuable. Second, that she had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, Maya called the lawyer from the diner during her break, keeping her voice low so the other waitresses wouldn't overhear. I need to know everything about Aunt Lily's work history. Every studio she worked for, every film she worked on, everything. Hartman was quiet for a moment. May I ask what prompted this? I found films in the building, old films, some with names I recognize. I need to understand where they came from and whether I'm even allowed to have them. I see. Hartman's tone shifted, becoming more serious. Ms. Chen, your aunt left a letter for you. She specified it should only be given to you if you found what she'd been protecting. I'll bring it by the diner this afternoon. The letter was written in careful cursive on yellowing paper, dated just 6 months before Aunt Lily's death. Dear Maya, if you're reading this, you've found my life's work. The vault contains 2,147 films, most of them unknown to the public, many believed lost forever. I spent 40 years collecting them from studio archives that were being purged, from estate sales of directors and actors, from dumpsters behind post-production facilities that were being demolished. The studios were throwing away their history, and I couldn't let it all disappear. I never had the resources to properly catalog what I'd saved, and I couldn't go public without risking legal battles with studios that would claim ownership even though they'd thrown these films away like garbage. I needed someone I could trust to finish what I started, someone who would understand that these films matter not because they're worth money, but because they're proof that art and dreams and human creativity deserve to be preserved. You were 8 years old, the only time we had a real conversation. Your father brought you to visit when I was working at Universal. You asked me what I did, and I told you I made sure movies didn't die. You said that sounded like being a doctor for stories. That's exactly what it is, Maya. I'm trusting you to be a doctor for these stories now. The vault room is climate controlled. The power bill is paid automatically from a trust fund that will last another 15 years. The films are stable for now, but they need proper preservation. They need to be seen. They need to matter to people beyond just me. I'm sorry to put this burden on you when I know you're struggling, but you're the only family I have who might understand. Be brave, be smart, and don't let the studios steal this back after I spent my life saving it from them. With love, Aunt Lily. Maya read the letter 3 times, sitting in her car in the diner parking lot while her brake ticked away. 2,847 films, not just the ones in the vault, but all those canisters stacked throughout the second floor, an entire archive of cinema history that Aunt Lily had rescued and hidden, and now it was Maya's problem. The bills came due before Maya could figure out what to do about the films. The eviction notice was followed by a court date, then a sheriff's notice saying her belongings would be removed in 48 hours. She'd managed to scrape together first month's rent and deposit for a cheaper apartment in Sun Valley, a 1-bedroom where the girls would share the bedroom and Maya would sleep on the couch. But she needed to be out of the current place by Friday, or lose everything to the curb. Thursday night, Maya stood in the empty North Hollywood apartment with 2 suitcases and 3 garbage bags containing everything they owned. The furniture had come with the place. The dishes and small appliances had been from dollar stores and Goodwill, easy enough to pack. Everything that mattered fit in her Honda Civic with room to spare. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit like a life preserver. "Our new place isn't ready until tomorrow," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "So tonight we're going to have an adventure." She drove them to Starlight Studios, using the last $20 in her wallet to buy sleeping bags from Walmart. They unrolled them in Aunt Lily's old office, the one with the cot and hot plate, making a campsite on the marble floor. "This is cool," Sophie said, though Maya could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Like we're explorers in a castle." "Exactly like that," Maya agreed, pulling both girls close. "We're explorers figuring out our next adventure." But after they fell asleep, Maya sat with her back against the wall and let herself feel the full weight of how far she'd fallen, living in an abandoned building with her 2 daughters because she couldn't afford rent anywhere else. That was the reality of her life at 31. That was what becoming a single mother in Los Angeles with no education and no safety net looked like. She pulled out her phone and opened a browser, searching for information about selling valuable film collections. The results were complicated and overwhelming. Auction houses specializing in entertainment memorabilia, museums with acquisition departments, private collectors, all of it requiring authentication, provenance documentation, and legal proof of ownership that Maya didn't have. One search result caught her eye. A film archivist named Dr. Robert Chen, no relation, who worked at UCLA's Film and Television Archive. His faculty page said he specialized in film preservation and restoration, particularly of lost American cinema from 1940-1960. There was an email address and a note that he welcomed inquiries from collectors and researchers. Maya stared at the email address for 10 minutes before she started typing. Dr. Chen, my name is Maya Chen. I recently inherited a building in Culver City that contains what I believe to be significant film holdings, including possible lost footage from major directors. I don't have a background in film history, and I need guidance on how to properly identify and preserve what I've found. Would you be willing to consult? I can't pay much, but I can offer access to the collection for research purposes. Thank you, Maya Chen. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then closed the laptop and tried to sleep on the floor of an abandoned studio while her daughters breathed softly nearby and the weight of impossible decisions pressed down on her chest. Dr. Robert Chen responded within 4 hours. His email was brief but intrigued. Ms. Chen, I'd be happy to consult. Lost film collections surface occasionally, usually containing material of modest historical interest. However, I'm always optimistic about new discoveries. Would Saturday morning work for an initial assessment? Best regards, Robert Chen, Ph.D. Saturday morning found Maya anxiously pacing the lobby of Starlight Studios while Sophie and Emma played explorers on the grand staircase. She'd spent Friday moving their meager belongings into the Sun Valley apartment, but she'd brought the girls back here for Dr. Chen's visit. Somehow it seemed important that they be present, that they understand what Aunt Lily had left them, even if Maya herself didn't fully understand yet. Dr. Chen arrived in a vintage Mercedes that looked like it had been carefully maintained for 40 years. He was in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of casual academic wardrobe that suggested someone who'd stopped caring about impressing people decades ago. Wire-rimmed glasses, cardigan with elbow patches, canvas messenger bag. That had seen better days. Ms. Chen, he approached with his hand extended. Thank you for reaching out. This building is remarkable. Starlight Studios was one of the smaller independents in the 30s and 40s. I didn't know it was still standing. Maya shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the genuine warmth in his eyes. My aunt owned it for over 30 years. She worked in film preservation. Lillian Chen. Recognition sparked in his expression. I never met her, but her name comes up in archival circles. She had a reputation for being brilliant and intensely private. There were rumors she'd saved significant material from various studio purges, but she never participated in conferences or published her findings. She left me her collection, Maya said. I don't know what most of it is, but I think some of it might be important. Dr. Chen followed her up to the second floor, his eyes taking in the rows of film canisters with growing excitement. He pulled out a small notebook and started examining labels, his fingers gentle as he handled the aged metal containers. These are mostly studio dailies and outtakes, he murmured, reading labels. Raw footage from productions, alternative takes, scenes that didn't make final cuts. Potentially valuable for scholarship, but not usually museum-worthy unless... He stopped, his attention caught by one canister. Is this correct? This label says Howard Hawks, Red River, 1948, deleted scenes. I don't know if the labels are accurate, Maya admitted. My aunt wrote them, but I haven't watched any of the films to verify. Dr. Chen's hands were shaking slightly as he set down the canister and pulled out his phone. Ms. Chen, if this is authentic, it's significant. Red River is considered one of the greatest westerns ever made. Hawks supposedly shot 30 minutes of footage that was cut for pacing. That footage was believed destroyed. He looked up at her. May I examine more of the collection? There's a vault room, Maya said. That's where I think the most important films are. She led him to the steel door, unlocking the deadbolts with Aunt Lily's keys. Dr. Chen stepped into the vault room and went absolutely still. Maya watched his face transform from professional interest to something close to religious awe. He moved to the first shelf, reading labels, his lips moving silently as he processed what he was seeing. Then he turned to Maya, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Chen, do you understand what you have here? Some of it? The magnificent Ambersons caught my attention. Dr. Chen carefully lifted that canister, examining the seal, checking the label from multiple angles. If this is authentic, and I'll need to verify it with proper equipment, but if this is authentic, you're holding one of the holy grails of cinema preservation. The original cut of the magnificent Ambersons is the most sought-after lost film in American cinema history. He set it down reverently and moved to another shelf. Hitchcock's untitled 1952 project, Billy Wilder's unfinished comedy from 1955, Fritz Lang's Lost Noir from 1948. His voice was rising with each discovery. These aren't just valuable films, Ms. Chen. These are missing pieces of film history that scholars thought were gone forever. Sophie and Emma had followed them upstairs and now stood in the vault room doorway watching the strange man get increasingly excited about old movie canisters. Are we rich now? Emma asked with 6-year-old directness. Dr. Chen laughed, a sound mixed with disbelief and joy. If these films are authentic and in viewable condition, this collection could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The number hung in the air like something physical. Maya felt her knees go weak. Hundreds of millions. The magnificent Ambersons alone could fetch 70 to 80 million from the right buyer. And that's just one film. Based on what I'm seeing here, your aunt assembled one of the most significant private film archives in existence. Dr. Chen pulled out his phone. I need to make some calls. With your permission, I'd like to bring in colleagues who specialize in authentication and preservation. This needs to be handled very carefully. Wait. Maya held up her hand, her mind racing. Before we bring in anyone else, I need to understand something. My aunt said in her letter that studios might try to claim ownership, even though they threw these films away. Is that true? Dr. Chen's expression sobered. It's complicated. Copyright law is murky when it comes to abandoned materials. Studios might argue they still own the intellectual property, even if they discarded the physical prints. On the other hand, your aunt purchased this building and everything in it legally, and there's precedent for finders of abandoned cultural artifacts establishing ownership. He paused. You'll need an excellent entertainment lawyer before this goes public. I can't afford an excellent entertainment lawyer, Maya said flatly. I can barely afford the property taxes on this building. How much are the back taxes? $8,300. Due in 6 weeks or the county seizes the property. Dr. Chen looked around the vault room at millions of dollars worth of lost cinema. Ms. Chen, I can advance you that money personally as a loan against potential consulting fees, but you need to let me bring in authentication experts immediately. The longer these films sit unexamined, the greater the risk of degradation. Some of this stock is 80 years old. We're in a race against chemistry. Maya thought about Aunt Lily's letter. Be brave, be smart, and don't let the studios steal this back. She looked at her daughters standing in the doorway of the vault, at Dr. Chen's earnest face, at the canisters containing art that had been hidden for decades. "Okay," she said, "but I need to be involved in every step. I need to understand what's happening and why, and I need your word that we're protecting these films first, monetizing them second." Dr. Chen smiled. "Ms. Chen, you sound exactly like a film archivist. Your aunt chose well." The authentication process took 3 weeks and brought a parade of experts to Starlight Studios. Dr. Chen assembled a team of film historians, chemical analysts, and digital preservationists who descended on the vault room with equipment Maya didn't understand and enthusiasm she found both inspiring and terrifying. They started with the magnificent Ambersons, carefully unsealing the canister and examining the film stock under controlled conditions. Maya watched from a respectful distance as they threaded ancient celluloid through a specialized projector designed for fragile materials. The image that appeared on the makeshift screen made everyone in the room go silent. Black and white footage of a young man walking through an elaborate mansion set, the camera following him with the kind of fluid movement that was revolutionary for 1942. The quality was pristine, the cinematography stunning even to Maya's untrained eye. "It's real," whispered a woman named Dr. Patricia Moore, one of the leading Orson Welles scholars. "This is the missing footage. You can see the visual language, the depth of field, the way he's using the space. This is Welles at his peak." They watched 20 minutes of footage before Dr. Chen stopped the projector, unwilling to risk the fragile film stock by viewing more without proper preservation. But those 20 minutes were enough to confirm what Aunt Lily's labels promised. The vault contained treasures that the world thought were lost forever. Over the following days, they authenticated more films. The Hitchcock thriller turned out to be a completed but unreleased project. From 1952, a dark psychological drama that the studio had shelved for being too disturbing. The Billy Wilder comedy was an unfinished masterpiece from 1955 that had been abandoned when the lead actor died mid-production. A Fritz Lang noir from 1948 that the studio destroyed all copies of because they feared its political content would trigger the House Un-American Activities Committee. On and on it went. Each canister opened revealed another piece of cinema history. Some were complete films that had never been released. Others were director's cuts that differed significantly from the theatrical versions. Still others were deleted scenes, alternative endings, or footage from legendary productions that existed nowhere else. By the end of the second week, Dr. Chen's team had examined approximately 200 films from the vault room and estimated the total collection at 2,047 reels, exactly as Aunt Lily had stated in her letter. They'd stopped opening canisters after the first 200, overwhelmed by the scope of what they'd found. Dr. Chen gathered everyone in Aunt Lily's old office for a summary meeting. Maya sat with Sophie and Emma, the girls having become unofficial mascots of the authentication team. The researchers had taken to explaining their work to the children in simple terms, turning the vault room into an impromptu film history classroom. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Chen began, his voice formal for the first time since they'd met. "I've consulted with colleagues at several major institutions and with appraisers who specialize in rare film materials. Based on what we've examined so far, we estimate the total value of this collection at somewhere between $350 million and $400 million. The number was so large, it didn't feel real. Maya heard it bounce off the walls of the room without fully penetrating her consciousness. $350 million. That was movie star money, tech billionaire money, money that existed in a different universe from the one where she worried about making rent. The magnificent Ambersons alone is worth an estimated $80 million, Dr. Chen continued. The Hitchcock film, $60 to $70 million. The Lang Noir, $40 million. And those are just the headline pieces. There are dozens of other films here that museums and archives would pay millions to acquire. Dr. Moore leaned forward. Ms. Chen, you need to understand the cultural significance of what you've inherited. This isn't just about money. This collection fills gaps in film history that we thought would remain empty forever. This is on par with discovering lost Shakespeare plays or missing chapters of Mark Twain. This matters. What happens next? Maya asked, her voice steadier than she felt. That's up to you, Dr. Chen said. You have several options. You could auction the collection piece by piece, maximizing profit. You could donate it to a museum and take a substantial tax deduction. You could create your own archive and charge institutions for access, or some combination of all three. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've taken the liberty of researching entertainment lawyers who specialize in intellectual property and found works. There are 3 firms I'd recommend, all of whom would likely take your case on contingency given what's at stake. You'll need legal protection before this goes public because the studios will fight you. Even though they threw this material away. Especially because they threw it away, Dr. Moore interjected. Studios are protective of their intellectual property rights, even when they've failed to preserve the actual materials. They'll argue that your aunt had no right to remove these films from studio property, even if that property was being demolished or purged. Maya felt the weight settling on her shoulders again. So I inherit millions of dollars worth of films, but I can't access that money without a legal fight I can't afford. You can access it, Dr. Chen said gently, but you need to be strategic. The authentication process gives you leverage. Now, we know what you have. The next step is establishing clear provenance and ownership through the legal system before approaching buyers or institutions. How long will that take? 6 months to a year if everything goes smoothly. Longer if studios mount serious challenges. 6 months. Maya thought about the Sun Valley apartment where she couldn't afford to run the air conditioning, the diner job that barely covered expenses, the girls who deserved better than living on the edge of poverty, while their mother sat on a fortune she couldn't touch. What if I sold just one film? She asked. Something small, not one of the major pieces, just enough to pay the property taxes and keep this place while we figure out the rest. Dr. Chen considered this. That would likely trigger exactly the legal complications we're trying to avoid. As soon as money changes hands, studios will have standing to sue. Better to secure your legal position first, then monetize from a position of strength. So I wait, live poor while sitting on $300 million. You live carefully while building an unassailable legal case, Dr. Chen corrected. I know it's frustrating, but this collection survived 80 years of neglect and abandonment because your aunt was patient and protective. Don't lose it in the final stretch by being hasty. Maya looked at Sophie and Emma, both listening intently, even though they couldn't fully understand what was being discussed. She thought about Aunt Lily spending 36 years in this building, protecting these films without recognition or compensation, patient and protective until the end. Okay, Maya said, we do it right. What's the first step? The first step was hiring a lawyer named Jennifer Torres, a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in entertainment intellectual property. She took Maya's case on contingency after spending 3 hours in the vault room with Dr. Chen's authentication reports. This is the most significant found property case I've ever seen, Torres said, pacing Aunt Lily's office while reviewing documents. The legal precedents are unclear, but we have several advantages. First, your aunt purchased this building and all contents legally. Second, she kept meticulous records of where she acquired each film, most of them from sales of studio property that had been declared surplus or waste. Third, The studios demonstrated abandonment by destroying or discarding this material. "So we can win?" Maya asked. "We can build a case strong enough that studios will settle, rather than risk a court precedent that weakens their intellectual property claims across the board." Torres smiled. "They won't want a judge ruling that abandoned film materials become public domain or that finders have ownership rights. Better for them to negotiate terms that let you monetize the collection while they maintain nominal copyright." The legal strategy Torres proposed was complex but logical. She would file a declaratory judgment action asking the court to clarify Maya's ownership rights. Simultaneously, she'd approach major studios with settlement offers that gave them first right of refusal on materials related to their properties, while establishing Maya's right to sell or license to other parties if studios declined. "Essentially, we're offering them a chance to buy back their own history," Torres explained, "but making it clear you'll sell to museums or archives if they refuse. Most studios have preservationist divisions now. They care about legacy, they'll deal." The process began quietly. Torres filed paperwork with the court and sent carefully worded letters to studio legal departments. Dr. Chen's team continued authentication work, building an exhaustive catalog of the collection's contents. Maya kept working at the diner and living in the Sun Valley apartment, visiting Starlight Studios on weekends to check on the vault and let the girls play explorers. For 6 weeks, everything proceeded smoothly. Too smoothly, Torres warned. "Studios are researching their options. The silence means they're taking this seriously." Then the lawsuit hit. Universal Pictures, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, and Fox filed a joint action claiming ownership of all films in the collection that had been produced or distributed by their predecessors. They demanded immediate access to the vault for their own authentication and sought an injunction preventing Maya from selling, licensing, or exhibiting any materials pending resolution of ownership. The lawsuit made the news within hours. Waitress inherits millions in lost films. Studios fight back. The headlines framed it as David versus Goliath, which Maya supposed was accurate. She was a single mother who served eggs at a diner. They were corporations worth billions. Her phone started ringing constantly. Reporters requesting interviews, documentarians wanting to film the story, private collectors offering to buy specific films. Legality be damned. Maya ignored all of them on Torres's advice, but then Connor Blackwell called. "Ms. Chen, my name is Connor Blackwell. I represent a consortium of private collectors interested in acquiring unique film properties. I understand you're facing legal pressure from the studios, and I'd like to offer an alternative." Maya switched the call to speaker, so Torres, who was in her apartment reviewing documents, could hear. "What kind of alternative?" "We purchase the entire collection from you for cash. 300 million closing in 30 days. You walk away clean. We handle all legal issues with the studios. Everyone wins." Torres was shaking her head vigorously, scribbling no on a legal pad. "That's a generous offer," Maya said carefully, "but I'm not interested in selling the collection in its entirety." 400 million. Final offer. This is far more than you'll net after years of legal battles and authentication costs. The collection isn't for sale as a lot. Thank you for your interest." She hung up. Torres looked grim. That's the third call like that this week. Private collectors are circling because they know studios are tied up in legal knots. They'd buy the collection, break it apart, and sell pieces to the highest bidders without regard for preservation or historical value. "Aunt Lily would hate that," Maya said. "Your aunt spent her life saving these films from oblivion. Don't let profiteers destroy that work." Torres pulled out more documents. "We're getting close to a settlement framework with the studios. They're starting to understand they can't win outright ownership. Be patient a little longer." But patience was hard when the electricity in her apartment was getting shut off for non-payment. When Sophie needed glasses Maya couldn't afford. When Emma's shoes had holes and Maya was choosing between fixing them and buying groceries. Dr. Chen found her crying in the vault room one afternoon, surrounded by millions of dollars in films she couldn't touch while her daughters went without. "I feel like Tantalus," she said, wiping her eyes, "starving while standing in a feast I can't eat." Dr. Chen sat down beside her on the floor. "Your aunt lived like this for 36 years, surrounded by treasures while working minimum-wage jobs. Do you know why? Because she was protecting the films. Because she understood that some things matter more than personal comfort, that art and history and human creativity are worth sacrifice." He gestured at the vault. "These films existed before you and will exist after you. You're just a guardian for a brief moment in time. The question is, what kind of guardian will you be?" Maya looked at him through tear-blurred vision. "The kind who makes sure her daughters eat. The kind who makes sure her daughters learn that integrity matters more than easy money." Dr. Chen corrected gently. "Sophie and Emma are watching how you handle this. They're learning what you value. That's worth more than any amount of money." The settlement came in October, 6 months after Maya first opened the vault room. Torres negotiated a framework that satisfied all parties while preserving Maya's core interests. The studios acknowledged Maya's ownership of the physical film materials. Maya acknowledged the studio's copyright interests in the intellectual property. A joint preservation trust would be established, funded by studios and private donations, to properly archive and restore the collection. Maya would receive $50 million immediately for her ownership interest and ongoing royalties from any commercial exploitation of the films. $50 million, not the $350 to $400 million the collection might theoretically bring at auction, but real money she could access immediately. Life-changing money. Set her daughters up for life money. Torres presented the settlement agreement in her office, watching Maya's face carefully. "I know it's less than the collection's appraised value, but it's guaranteed money now versus uncertain returns after years more legal battles, and the Preservation Trust ensures the films are protected. Aunt Lily would approve." Maya read through the dense legal language, her hands shaking slightly. $50 million. She could pay off every debt she'd ever had with a rounding error, could buy a house, secure her daughter's college funds, never worry about money again. But more than that, she could ensure the films were preserved properly, that they'd be seen by scholars and students and anyone who cared about cinema history, that Aunt Lily's life work wouldn't end up scattered across private collections or locked in studio vaults forever. "Where do I sign?" The news conference was held at UCLA's Film and Television Archive, where the Preservation Trust would be housed. Maya stood at a podium flanked by studio executives, university administrators, and Dr. Chen's authentication team. Reporters packed the room, cameras rolling, everyone wanting to hear about the waitress who'd inherited Hollywood's missing history. Maya had prepared remarks, but found herself speaking from the heart instead. "My Aunt Lillian Chen spent her life saving films that everyone else had given up on. She worked minimum-wage jobs and lived in an abandoned building because she believed these stories mattered. She believed art deserved to survive, even when it wasn't profitable or convenient." The vault room contains 2,147 reels of film, including complete versions of movies the world thought were lost forever. The Magnificent Ambersons, unknown works by Hitchcock, Wilder, Lang, Hawks, and dozens of other masters. Deleted scenes, director's cuts, alternative endings, pieces of cinema history that fill in blanks we didn't know we could fill. I'm donating the majority of this collection to the Preservation Trust, so scholars and students and film lovers can study and appreciate these works, because that's what Aunt Lily would have wanted, because some things matter more than money, because these films belong to everyone, not just to me or to the studios or to private collectors. My daughters are here today. Sophie and Emma, come up here. She waited while the girls climbed onto the stage, both dressed in their nicest clothes, looking overwhelmed by the cameras. I want them to remember this day. I want them to know that their great aunt was a hero who saved treasures from oblivion, and I want them to learn that being a guardian, even for a little while, is worth more than being rich. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Studio executives smiled carefully calibrated smiles, and Maya held her daughters close, feeling the weight of the vault room finally lift from her shoulders. The money hit her bank account on a Tuesday. Maya stared at the balance on her phone, unable to process the number. $50 million minus Torres's contingency fee and various taxes left her with $31 million. Still an incomprehensible amount. Still more money than she'd earned in 1,000 lifetimes of waitressing. She paid off her debts first. Credit cards, medical bills, back rent, parking tickets, every small financial wound accumulated through years of poverty. The total came to $18,000, a number that had seemed insurmountable 2 months ago, now barely registered. Then she bought a house, not a mansion, just a modest 3-bedroom in Studio City with a yard where the girls could play. She furnished it carefully, making sure Sophie and Emma each had their own rooms, with good beds and desks for homework and space to grow. She quit the diner, tipping out the entire staff with $5,000 each and watching their shocked faces as they counted the money. She enrolled in community college, taking film history classes because the vault room had sparked something in her. Curiosity about the art Aunt Lily had protected, desire to understand what those old masters had been trying to say. Dr. Chen invited her to join the Preservation Trust's advisory board. She accepted, learning the technical aspects of film restoration and the politics of archive management. She attended screenings of recovered films, watching as the magnificent Ambersons premiered in its original form 82 years after Orson Welles' vision had been destroyed by studio interference. The film was stunning, dark and complex and emotionally devastating in ways the theatrical version only hinted at. Critics called it a masterpiece. Film historians revised their assessments of Welles' career, and Maya sat in the audience with Sophie and Emma, knowing Aunt Lily was somewhere smiling. But the best moment came 6 months later at the grand reopening of Starlight Studios. Maya had used part of her settlement money to renovate the building, transforming it into a state-of-the-art film preservation center and public archive. The lobby's Art Deco glory was restored, the screening rooms updated with modern equipment, the vault room expanded to properly house the collection. On opening night, hundreds of people toured the facility, film students examining Aunt Lily's meticulous preservation techniques, industry veterans reminiscing about the studio's golden age, families with children learning that movies were made by real people who cared about their craft. Maya gave the opening remarks standing on the grand staircase, where her daughters had played explorers months before. This building is called Starlight Studios because the founders believed movies could be light in darkness. My aunt believed the same thing. She dedicated her life to making sure that light didn't go out, even when the rest of the world had moved on. Today, we're reopening Starlight Studios, not as a place where films are made, but as a place where films are saved. The Preservation Center will work with archives worldwide to rescue endangered materials and make them accessible. The Public Archive will offer free screenings and educational programs. And the vault room, she paused, emotion catching her voice. The vault room will remain exactly as Aunt Lily left it, a testament to what one person with courage and commitment can accomplish. The crowd applauded. Dr. Chen caught her eye from the audience, nodding approval. Torres was there too, looking satisfied with how it had all turned out. And Sophie and Emma stood beside Maya on the staircase, understanding better now what their inheritance had really been. Not money, though money had come. Not films, though films had been the vehicle. Their inheritance was the lesson that some things matter more than survival, that art and history and human creativity deserve protection, that being a guardian, even briefly, means everything. That night, after the crowds had left and the building was quiet, Maya walked through the vault room one last time. She ran her fingers along the film canisters, reading Aunt Lily's careful labels, thinking about the woman who'd spent 36 years in this space protecting stories no one else valued. "Thank you," Maya whispered to the silence, "for trusting me, for believing I'd understand, for giving me a chance to matter." The films sat in their climate-controlled space, waiting for the next researcher, the next restoration project, the next generation of film lovers who'd discover that the past wasn't dead. It was just sleeping in canisters, dreaming of projection light and audiences who'd appreciate what masters had created. Maya turned off the lights and locked the vault room door, knowing Aunt Lily's life work was finally complete. The shadows had stopped moving. The films were safe. And somewhere in Hollywood's missing history, gaps were filled with the stories that never should have been lost. The guardianship had passed. The legacy continued. And two little girls who'd lived in an abandoned building were learning that treasure comes in many forms, but the most valuable kind is the treasure you choose to share. 5 years later, Maya stood in the same vault room, but everything had changed. Sophie was 14 now, a freshman at the prestigious Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, studying film production. Emma was 11, already showing signs of her older sister's creative talents, spending weekends in Starlight Studios' youth education program, learning about cinematography and editing. Maya herself had completed her bachelor's degree in film studies and was halfway through a master's program at UCLA, working alongside Dr. Chen on a comprehensive history of lost American cinema. The waitress who'd once struggled to make rent was now Dr. Chen's research partner, her name appearing on academic papers and preservation grant applications. But success hadn't insulated them from the consequences of their choices. Connor Blackwell, the collector who'd offered $400 million for the collection, had spent 5 years trying to undermine the Preservation Trust. He'd filed lawsuits challenging the settlement. He'd attempted to purchase individual films from unscrupulous dealers claiming to have duplicates. He'd even tried to bribe members of the Trust's board to grant him exclusive access to certain materials. Every attack had failed, but they'd been exhausting. Maya had learned that doing the right thing didn't end with one good decision. It required constant vigilance, constant defense of principles against people who saw art as just another commodity to be exploited. The phone call came on a Wednesday afternoon while Maya was cataloging recently discovered materials in the vault. A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "Ms. Chen, my name is Dr. Sarah Martinez. I'm the chief archivist at the Library of Congress. We've received a donation that I believe relates to your collection. Could you come to Washington?" Maya flew out the next morning, leaving the girls with Dr. Chen, who'd become something like a grandfather to them over the years. The Library of Congress was imposing, all marble columns and hushed reverence for knowledge. Dr. Martinez met her in the Film Preservation Wing, a massive climate-controlled facility that made even Starlight Studios look modest. 3 weeks ago, we received an anonymous donation, Martinez explained, leading Maya through corridors lined with film vaults. A complete set of studio archives from RKO Pictures 1935 to 1957, Documents, production files, financial records, correspondence, everything. RKO was one of the studios that destroyed the magnificent Ambersons footage, Maya said, understanding beginning to dawn. Exactly, and buried in these archives, we found something extraordinary. Martinez stopped at a vault door and unlocked it with careful precision. Inside were rows of boxes, each labeled with production codes and dates. She pulled out one box and opened it on an examination table. Production memos from the magnificent Ambersons, including a complete inventory of footage shot, footage cut, and footage destroyed in May 1942. Martinez pulled out yellowed papers covered in typed notes. According to this inventory, RKO destroyed 13 reels of footage, but your aunt's vault contained 13 reels of the magnificent Ambersons' original cut. Maya's breath caught. You're saying we can prove exactly where Aunt Lily got the film? Better than that, we found a memo dated June 1942, 1 month after the official destruction. A junior editor named Robert Fernandez filed a report saying he'd made duplicate preservation copies of the destroyed footage before it was burned, against direct orders from studio management. He was fired the next day, but the memo survived in the files. Martinez pulled out another document. Robert Fernandez worked at RKO until 1948, then disappeared from industry records. But we found employment records showing he worked as a freelance film technician from 1949 to 1987, and in 1973, a Robert Fernandez sold a collection of film materials to someone named Maya Chen for $600. The pieces clicked into place. Aunt Lily didn't steal anything. She bought salvaged materials from the person who'd originally saved them. She bought materials that RKO had officially destroyed and tried to fire the person who preserved them. This documentation establishes clear provenance and demolishes any argument that she acquired the films improperly. Martinez smiled. We're making these records available to your preservation trust. Connor Blackwell's lawsuits are finished. Maya felt tears burning in her eyes. After 5 years of constant legal pressure, constant questions about Aunt Lily's methods, constant implications that the collection was somehow tainted, here was proof. Aunt Lily had been exactly what Maya always believed, a guardian who'd purchased abandoned treasures from other guardians and protected them when no one else would. She called Sophie and Emma that night from her hotel room, needing to hear their voices, needing to share the victory. Your great-aunt Lily has been completely vindicated, she told them. We found proof that everything she did was legal and ethical. The films are protected forever now. Sophie's voice came through the phone, mature beyond her 14 years. Mom, we always knew that. You didn't need proof. I know, baby, but the world needed proof, and now they have it. The documentation from the Library of Congress ended Connor Blackwell's legal challenges within weeks. His lawyers withdrew all pending lawsuits. His attempts to purchase materials from dealers dried up when those dealers realized they'd face criminal charges for selling stolen property. He vanished from the film preservation world. His consortium dissolved, his reputation in tatters. But victory brought an unexpected visitor to Starlight Studios. An elderly man appeared one morning while Maya was teaching a film history class to local high school students. He waited patiently until the class ended, then approached with a cane supporting his frail frame. Ms. Chen, my name is Robert Fernandez. I understand you've been looking into my past. Maya's heart jumped. You're the RKO editor, the one who saved the magnificent Ambersons. I made duplicate negatives of everything they planned to destroy. Orson's footage, but also materials from dozens of other productions. The studios were burning history because storage was expensive, and they didn't think anyone would care about old movies. His eyes, clouded with age, still held fierce intelligence. I was 23 years old. I thought I'd lose my job. I didn't realize I'd lose my career. You sold films to my aunt. I sold her everything I'd saved over 25 years. She was the only person who understood why it mattered. She paid me $600, which was all she had, and promised she'd protect what I'd protected. He looked around the restored lobby of Starlight Studios. She kept that promise, and you've honored it. Maya invited him to sit, pulling up chairs in the lobby where sunlight streamed through the restored Art Deco windows. Why did you come forward now? Because I'm 91 years old and I wanted to meet the woman who finished what Lillian and I started. He pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket pocket. I kept records of every film I saved. Dates, sources, condition assessments. I thought someday it might matter for legal purposes, but I never expected to live long enough to see it used. He handed the notebook to Maya. Inside were meticulous entries spanning decades. Films saved from dumpsters behind studios. Materials purchased from estate sales of directors and cinematographers. Footage salvaged from post-production facilities before they were demolished. Every entry included the date, the source, and notes on the film's condition. This is a complete provenance record for the entire collection, Maya whispered, flipping through pages. It's yours now, along with this. He pulled out a letter, the paper so old it felt like cloth in Maya's hands. Lillian wrote this to me 6 months before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should find her niece Maya and give her this letter. Took me 5 years to work up the courage, but seeing what you've built here, I know she chose the right person. Maya unfolded the letter with shaking hands. Aunt Lily's careful handwriting covered both sides of the page. Dear Robert, if you're reading this letter to Maya, then I'm gone and she's found what we protected. Tell her about the night in 1973 when you brought me those first canisters, how we sat in this building and watched the magnificent Ambersons on a wall projector, crying because we thought we were the only 2 people in the world who'd ever see Orson's complete vision. Tell her about the decades we spent quietly saving what everyone else was destroying, how you'd call me from payphones when you found materials being thrown away, and I'd drive across the city with $600 I'd scraped together from 3 jobs to buy them before the dumpsters were emptied. Tell her that being a guardian isn't glamorous or profitable or even particularly rational. It's choosing to care about things that don't directly benefit you. It's spending your life protecting stories so future generations can experience beauty you'll never personally profit from. Tell her I chose her not because we were close, but because when she was 8 years old and visiting the studio, she looked at a film canister and asked me if the people in the movie knew they'd live forever. That's the question of someone who understands that art transcends the artists who create it. Tell her to be brave. Tell her to be stubborn. Tell her that guardianship is the highest calling and she's worthy of it. With love always, Lillian. Maya couldn't speak for a long moment. When she finally looked up, Robert Fernandez was smiling through his own tears. She was right about you, he said simply. Robert Fernandez became a regular presence at Starlight Studios over the following months. He gave lectures to film students about preservation techniques from the analog era. He consulted on restoration projects, his decades of experience invaluable for handling fragile materials, and he became a friend to Maya's family, a living connection to Aunt Lily and the early days of the collection. Sophie interviewed him for a documentary project at school, producing a short film about film preservation that won awards at youth festivals. Emma painted his portrait for an art class, capturing the fierce determination in his eyes that had led him to risk his career at 23 to save movies no one else valued. On Robert's 92nd birthday, Maya organized a celebration at Starlight Studios. Film preservationists came from around the world. The mayor of Los Angeles proclaimed it Robert Fernandez Day, and they screened The Magnificent Ambersons in its complete original form, the film that had started everything, the masterpiece that Robert had saved, and Lillian had protected, and Maya had shared with the world. Watching the film with her daughters on either side of her, and Robert Fernandez sitting in the front row, Maya understood what Aunt Lily's letter had meant. Guardianship wasn't about ownership, it was about stewardship. It was about recognizing that you were just one link in a chain of people who cared enough to preserve beauty for those who came after. The Preservation Trust had grown beyond anything Maya had imagined. They'd rescued endangered film collections from 7 countries. They'd trained a generation of archivists. They'd digitized thousands of films that would have degraded beyond recovery. And they'd proved that film preservation could be financially sustainable through grants, donations, and licensing arrangements that respected both commerce and art. Maya's settlement money was nearly gone, invested in the trust and in her daughter's education and in the ongoing operations of Starlight Studios. But she wasn't poor. She had a career she loved, working with Dr. Chen on research that mattered. She had a home filled with love instead of fear, and she had the satisfaction of knowing that Aunt Lily's life work continued to grow and evolve. Connor Blackwell made one final appearance, showing up unannounced at Starlight Studios on a random Tuesday. Security called Maya, uncertain whether to let him in or call the police. She surprised herself by saying she'd see him. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by years of legal defeats and professional ostracism. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been resignation. "I came to apologize," he said without preamble. "I spent 5 years trying to break apart your collection for profit, tried to undermine everything you built. I was wrong." Maya waited, saying nothing. "I told myself I was a collector, that I appreciated art. But I didn't appreciate it. I wanted to own it, to control it, to profit from it." He looked around the lobby at the visitors examining exhibits, at the film students discussing techniques, at the families attending free screenings. "You did what I could never do. You let it belong to everyone." "Is that all?" Maya asked, her voice neutral. "I'm donating my private collection to the trust. 200 films, most of them rare, but none as significant as what you have. It's not restitution, it's just the right thing to do." He pulled out a document and set it on the reception desk. "No conditions, no publicity, just films that should be preserved properly instead of sitting in my climate-controlled vault, being seen by no one." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Your Aunt Lillian would be proud of what you've built. I'm sorry I tried to destroy it." Maya watched him walk out of Starlight Studios, probably for the last time. She felt no satisfaction in his defeat, no vindication in his apology, just a quiet recognition that some people learned eventually, even if they had to lose everything first, to understand what really mattered. 10 years after inheriting the vault room, Maya stood at a podium in the Kennedy Center, receiving the National Medal of Arts from the President of the United States. The award recognized her contributions to film preservation and her leadership in establishing public access to rare cinema materials. Sophie was in the audience, now a sophomore at USC's film school, already working on a documentary about women in early Hollywood. Emma sat beside her, wearing the same expression of fierce pride that Maya had seen on her face when she was 6 years old, asking if old movies made people live forever. Dr. Chen was there too, retired now, but still consulting on preservation projects, still Maya's mentor and friend. Robert Fernandez had passed away the year before at 93, but his notebook of saved films was displayed in the Library of Congress as a testament to what one young editor's courage had accomplished. The president hung the medal around Maya's neck, and spoke about the importance of preserving cultural heritage, about how Maya Chen had transformed from a struggling waitress to a leading voice in film preservation, about how the Starlight Studios collection had changed the way scholars understood American cinema history. But Maya's acceptance speech ignored her own accomplishments and focused on what mattered. This medal honors three people, not one. Robert Fernandez, who risked his career at 23 to save films his studio planned to destroy. Lillian Chen, who spent 36 years living in an abandoned building to protect what Robert had saved. And every young person who's walked through Starlight Studios and understood that art matters, that history matters, that being a guardian is the highest calling. I was a waitress struggling to feed my daughters when I inherited responsibility for films worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I could have sold them, could have taken the money and disappeared into comfortable obscurity. But my Aunt Lily taught me that some treasures aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be shared. Every film in the Starlight collection is available for research, for education, for anyone who wants to understand what masters of cinema created when Hollywood was young and bold and unafraid. That's worth more than any amount of money. That's worth a lifetime of guardianship. The audience stood and applauded. Flashbulbs popped. But Maya was looking at Sophie and Emma, seeing the women they were becoming. Women who understood that integrity mattered more than wealth, that stewardship mattered more than ownership, that being guardians, even briefly, was everything. Later that night, back in their hotel room, Emma asked the question that had been on Maya's mind for a decade. Mom, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd sold everything to that collector? If you'd taken the $400 million and just walked away? Maya thought about it honestly. Yes. I wonder if we'd have a bigger house, fancier cars, more comfortable lives. But I know what we'd have lost. Purpose. The knowledge that we protected something important. The legacy Aunt Lily trusted us with. Sophie, scrolling through her phone, looked up. The Library of Congress just posted something. They found another cache of lost films in a warehouse in Pittsburgh. Studio materials from the 1930s that were about to be thrown away. They're asking the Starlight Preservation Trust to help authenticate and restore them. Maya smiled. And so it continues. Another guardian found materials that needed protection. Another chapter in the work that never really ends. Will you go? Emma asked. We'll all go. This summer, after school ends. You'll learn how film preservation works in the field, how to assess materials, how to handle fragile stock, how to determine what's worth saving. Maya pulled both her daughters close, because someday you'll be the guardians, and you need to be ready. The guardianship had passed from Robert to Lillian to Maya. Someday it would pass to Sophie and Emma, and then to others who understood that art mattered, that history mattered, that beauty deserved protection even when it wasn't profitable. The shadows had stopped moving. The films were safe. And the vault room in Starlight Studios would stand for generations, a testament to everyone who'd chosen courage over comfort, preservation over profit, legacy over wealth. 3 generations of guardians protecting light in darkness. That was the real treasure Aunt Lily had left. Not the films themselves, but the understanding that being a guardian was worth more than being rich, that some stories deserved to live forever, and that ordinary people making extraordinary choices could change what the future inherited. Maya Chen had been a waitress. Now she was a guardian, and that, she understood finally, was the greatest transformation of all. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.